Arriving opposite the mouth of its fjord, we steered straight inland between beautiful wooden shores, and the grand glacier came in sight in its granite valley, glowing in the early sunshine and extending a noble invitation to come and see.
Today, the glaciers and landscape along the Inside Passage evoke similar thoughts and emotions as those described in the prose of John Muir, written over a century ago. Muir first saw Alaska's ice fields and the glaciers they spawn in 1879. More than 100 years later, the grand glaciers of Alaska's Inside Passage still act like icy magnets, attracting residents who live along the wooden shores. Scientists who conduct research in a place of beauty, and visitors who come to feast on the frozen sights.
You know, we have hundreds of glaciers here in Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve, but only 16 of them reach the ocean.
They say 3,000 years ago, this was all full of ice. LeConte had retreated that far.
A glacier is a lot like your checkbook. Your input and your output need to be the same for the glacier to be healthy.
So say a glacier covered this ridge, it could take 3-5 centuries or so before it starts to look like what we see here now.
I think it's just so grand. It's just something that you never think you're going to experience.
Everywhere the peaks seem comparatively slender and closely packed, as if nature had been here trying to see how many noble, well-dressed mountains could be crowded into one grand range.
The one grand range John Muir described today contains an astonishing collection of natural attractions: lush green forests, quiet islands, narrow rocky fjords, numerous glaciers, and 3 distinct ice fields. The Juneau ice field blankets over 1,500 square miles of land and is the 5th largest in North America. It stretches nearly 100 miles north to south and 45 miles east to west. Some 3 dozen glaciers flow from the Juneau ice field. The Stikine ice field covers 1,000 square miles in the mountains between Juneau and Wrangell. 3 Stikine icefield glaciers attract the most visitors: North and South Sawyer Glaciers in Tracy Arm and LeConte Glacier near Petersburg. The Brady Icefield rests along the flanks of the Fairweather Range and is part of the Great Tidewater Glacier System in Glacier Bay National Park. Just 200 years ago, Glacier Bay simply did not exist. A single ice field, 4,000 feet thick, completely filled the bay.
Standing here with facts so fresh and telling and held up so vividly before us, every seeing observer, not to say geologist, must readily apprehend the earth-sculpturing, landscape-making action of flowing ice. And here, too, one learns that the world, though made, is yet being made, that this is still the morning of creation.
The glaciers of Alaska's Inside Passage carved and shaped this landscape over millions of years as the Earth experienced cooling and warming cycles. During the Great Ice Age, 1/3 of the planet and half of Alaska was covered with ice. About 15,000 years ago, the climate warmed. The ice released its hold on the land and retreated. Then, about 3,000 years ago, there was another cooling trend. Again, the glaciers advanced. This most recent cooling, called the Little Ice Age, produced the glaciers seen today along the Inside Passage. About 250 years ago, the glaciers began their most recent retreat, back into the mountains that form the backbone of southeast Alaska. Glaciers may also have played an important role in populating the New World. When much of the Earth's water was frozen during the Great Ice Age, sea levels dropped, creating a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. One widely held theory is that hunters slowly migrated across this land bridge, eventually inhabiting North and South America. Tlingit oral history says the first people along the Inside Passage arrived by floating on a river running beneath a great glacier. Some archaeologists speculate that early seafaring peoples hunting marine mammals may have arrived by boat. Regardless of how they arrived, evidence indicates people lived along the Inside Passage thousands of years before the first European explorers arrived in the mid-1700s. Glaciers are born in collection areas, or cirques. The accumulated weight compacts snow layers from previous years into solid ice. When the accumulation becomes greater than the cirque, ice overflows. Aided by gravity, the glacier moves downward, like a frozen ice river carving a U-shaped valley. Moving glaciers connect around peaks, called nunataks, that jut through the ice. Mountain tops scoured by earlier glaciers appear rounded rather than pointed. Rocks plucked from the bedrock and frozen in the ice etch grooves and striations in the bedrock. Trim lines indicate the previous height of a glacier by showing abrupt changes in vegetation. Rocks scoured from surrounding valley walls create dark debris lines or moraines along the edges and down the center of glaciers. Crevasses up to 150 feet deep form when the moving ice bends over uneven ground. The unique crystal structure of glacier ice gives it a distinctive blue color. Glacier ice absorbs all colors of the visible light spectrum except blue, which passes through. When the dense blue ice is exposed to air and warmer temperatures, the crystalline structure begins to break down. Then all colors of light pass through, and the ice appears white. Water flowing from glaciers carries finely ground materials called rock flour or glacial silt. These suspended particles give glacier waters their gray color.
I wanted to examine the Auk Glacier in the morning, but tried to be satisfied with a general view and sketch as we sailed around its wide fan-shaped front. It is one of the most beautiful of all the coast glaciers that are in the first stage of decadence.
Muir's Auk Glacier is today known as the Mendenhall. This magnificent river of ice is southeast Alaska's most popular scenic attraction and one of the most visited glaciers in the world. The Mendenhall originates at 4,500 feet in the Juneau icefield. The ice created there moves a few feet a day on its 12-mile, 80-year journey to Mendenhall Lake. The terminus, or face of the Mendenhall Glacier, stretches about 1.5 miles at its widest point between Bullard and McGinnis Mountains. The Mendenhall has retreated about 2.5 miles since its furthest advance about 250 years ago. In the 1930s, the glacier still covered the rocks where the Mendenhall Glacier Visitor Center now stands. Today, more than 300,000 view and play in the Forest Service recreation area at the Mendenhall Glacier.
How dirty it is.
In the winter, most Mendenhall Glacier visitors are Juneau residents. The frozen lake and surrounding area offer recreation in a stunning setting. The Mendenhall is just one of about 3 dozen glaciers flowing from the Juneau icefield. This immense ice field covers an area the size of Rhode Island with shimmering white ice and black rocky faces. Although rising immediately behind Juneau, this great white expanse is mostly hidden from sea level view, except when one of the glaciers comes grinding down a valley. But as many are finding, instead of looking up at the glacier, it's possible to look down on them.
Okay, the ice field gets about 100 feet of snow every year. And just because of the weight of that snow, it will compress and turn into ice. Then the ice moves down the valleys. This glacier moves about 2 feet every day. So as we're standing here, we're moving very gradually towards the Mendenhall Lake down there at the bottom. The part up here behind you, this is called Suicide Ice Fall. To give you a little perspective on what you're looking at up there, that is as tall as the Empire State Building. Okay? That's about a 1,400 feet vertical drop.
Standing in the gateway of this glorious temple and regarding it only as a picture, its outlines may be easily traced. The water foreground of a pale green color, bounded at the head by a beveled barrier wall of bluish-white ice 400 or 500 feet high. A few snowy mountaintops appear beyond it, and on either hand rise a series of majestic pale gray granite rocks from 3,000 to 4,000 feet high. This is a Yosemite Valley in process of formation.
$91, $43, $52.
John Muir lacked today's modern scientific equipment to study glaciers, but he was a keen observer. He believed that his beloved Yosemite Valley in California had been carved by glaciers. During his Alaska visits, Muir found proof of the power of glaciers to shape the earth right before his eyes. Scientists today continue to study glaciers, and when they go to the office, they find themselves in a stunning laboratory. Dr. Maynard Miller began leading scientists and students on the Juneau ice field in 1948. Those returning each summer to continue the research live in permanent camps located on rock outcroppings.
You guys got your sunscreen on?
Mm-hmm.
It measures the incoming solar radiation and then the outgoing radiation.
134, 14.34 minutes west.
Some of the youngest scientists today are high school students from Petersburg. In 1983, they began measuring the LeConte Glacier face, the southernmost tidewater glacier in North America.
54. It's really close there, too.
During the winter of 1994, instructor Paul Bowen heard reports that something unusual was happening at the glacier's face. Bowen found out what in the spring when he returned to the glacier with his students.
It retreated over a half a mile in probably less than 5 to 6 months, and that was, as I understand from Dr. Motika of the University of Southeast Alaska and other glaciologists, that was the most active retreating tidewater glacier in North America.
A glacier is a lot like your checkbook. Your input and your output need to be the same for the glacier to be healthy. And here you can see that this glacier is spending madly through calving its lower end ice, so it's going to be a deficit spender here fairly quickly, and perhaps no longer a tidewater glacier in a few years.
We've had remarkable decrease in the ice, for example, at the terminus of the Mendenhall and the Herbert Glacier in recent years, and the Lemon Creek Glacier, just above and back of Juneau, has been disappearing very rapidly since the late 1960s. In the last 4 years, there has been no net retained accumulation on the Lemon Creek Glacier, the first time in 100 years that has happened. So natural climatic trends seem to be being upset by something else at the present time, and we're looking at that very carefully and critically.
Certainly throughout most of Alaska, we've seen a general retreat, which certainly reflects change in climate and probably reflects a general global warming. I think the add-on question is whether the global warming is being now influenced by human activity.
Tracing shining ways through fjord and sound, past forests and waterfalls, islands and mountains, and far as your headlands, it seems as if surely we must at length reach the very paradise of the poets, the abode of the blessed.
When John Muir visited the fjords and glaciers of the Inside Passage, he traveled by water. Today, hundreds of thousands of visitors each year follow in his wake. Some travel on their own by kayak or private boat. Others book passage on cruise ships of all sizes. Regardless of how today's visitors get to the glaciers Muir saw, they do travel with a few more amenities.
Wonderful glaciers. I can't believe we got snow on the mountains and we're swimming in the water here.
Don't splash it on
Oh.
Hey, for those of you who are still inside, I highly recommend you come out to either the front of the ship or the starboard side, because we're swinging in close to Lamplugh Glacier, one of the most beautiful glaciers in the park. You know, we have hundreds of glaciers here in Glacier Bay National Park and Preserve, but only 16 of them reach the ocean, are tidewater glaciers like Lamplugh.
Another popular glacier viewing destination is located in the Stikine icefield. Tracy Arm is located about 40 miles south of Juneau. Like Glacier Bay, Tracy Arm provides visitors with fjord travel and tidewater glaciers, but on a more intimate scale.
About 38 or 40 glaciers come off of the Stikine icefield, and they will flow down through the easiest valleys they can find. And that's when you get the start of glaciers. It's ice that moves, right? The North Sawyer Glacier, the one off to the port side now, presents us with a smaller face than the South Sawyer Glacier does, and is moving back or receding much more rapidly than the South Sawyer is. There are also lots and lots and lots of harbor seals hauled out on the ice here. Berths of these harbor seals are not restricted to a few major rookeries. They'll haul out any place they find a safe haven. And their major predator is the orca whale.
Not all who visit the glaciers and fjords travel by tour boat. Like John Muir, many make personal voyages of discovery to less visited areas, like Ford's Terror, a twisting, narrow fjord located beneath the Stikine icefield.
We were here last year, actually, not on our own boat, but we came up here with a friend, and we have friends visiting us from Singapore, and this has got to be one of the most spectacular areas, I think, particularly just behind us here, Ford's Terror. Totally different, particularly for us. Snow's quite a novelty for us. and ice even more so.
In the northern end of the Inside Passage, the dramatic power of glaciers to shape the landscape is evident on rivers as well as saltwater. The Chilkat River flows from mountain glaciers near Haines.
The whole river valley here is all the silt and deposits from when the glacier receded back. This whole valley was filled with the glacier up as high as these mountains on the left-hand side down here, about 3,000 foot. So as it melted back, it deposits all the silt and gravel, makes a wide, flat valley floor.
Kayaks are another popular way to explore fjords along the Inside Passage. One popular destination is LeConte Bay, located between Wrangell and Petersburg. At the head of this fjord is one of the world's most active tidewater glaciers. So sometimes the ice from the calving is so thick boats are unable to reach the face.
It's a fjord about 12 miles long. Narrowest is about 1.5 miles, and widest is about 3 miles. Beautiful coastal rainforest at the mouth, and then as you get further up in here, you can see the cliffs. It's just been uncovered. They say 3,000 years ago, this was all full of ice. LeConte had retreated that far in the last 3,000 years. The thing that excites them and why they're coming on it is to paddle to an area quietly without an engine and things like that, and be self-contained. In the boats, we carry everything we need, and that is our life, and then moving camp to camp. And lots of people, that is the reason they're doing it. It's backpacking on the water.
Medium-sized cruise ships are able to enter LeConte Bay. Their greater power and steel hulls make it easier for them to work through the ice. When Sid Wright is host on one of these tour boats, visitors receive his commentary with a twist.
Now, the only real way to make a glacier calve is to insult her. I've seen better blues in a New Orleans bar. You call that calving? You should be kicked right in the crevasse. It'll take a while, but it'll work.
Thank you, God.
It is an instructive example of a general glacier covering the hills and dales of a country that is not yet ready to be brought to the light of day. Not only covering, but creating a landscape with the features it is destined to have when, in the fullness of time, the fashioning ice sheet shall be lifted by the sun and the land become warm and fruitful.
The succession of one plant form after another, growing on the land once covered by ice, creates an opportunity for studying deglaciation.
7. Two of the students are working on a lichenometric survey. We know when the ice last covered these rocks, and we're measuring the diameters of 2 different species of lichens to try and determine growth rates in this particular fjord. And that information can then be used to determine deglaciation timing in other fjords where that history is not so well known. So that's sort of a botanical approach to glacial study.
On a rocky ridge or near the face of a retreating glacier, plants do eventually grow. In general, within the first 5 years after a glacier's retreat, sand and silt collect in depressions. Fungi, mosses, and lichens appear, and the first seedlings take hold. Within 25 years of the glacier's retreat, pioneering plants give way to alders. Within 50 to 80 years, spruce and cottonwood grow above willow and alder, taking their sunlight. After 180 years, older spruce dominate the overhead canopy, but hemlocks begin to poke through. After 350 years, the final stage of plant succession, the old-growth forest, takes hold. Hemlock mixed with some remaining spruce become the dominant tree. Plants struggle to grow in the barren ground left by a retreating glacier. Sometimes, however, despite the difficulty, plants and trees survive in surprising locations.
This tree is pretty unique because it's the only one that we've found so far on this whole Nunatak, and it's a Sitka spruce. It's probably about 60 to 75 years old, so this dwarfed shape actually represents a lot of years of growth.
Glacial advance may also be determined by studying plants on alpine ridges. Here, old takes on a new meaning.
It's not old in the sense of an old-growth forest where you have individual trees that might be 1,000 years old, but it's old in the sense that it hasn't been disturbed for maybe thousands of years. And it could, say a glacier covered this ridge, it could take 3 to 5 centuries or so before it starts to look like what we see here now.
The Ptarmigan Glacier is located on the ridges behind Juneau. During the Little Ice Age, it filled what is today an open valley. On lower glaciers, like the Mendenhall, it's possible to measure the height of past ice by today's growth pattern of trees. Above timberline, such obvious clues don't exist, so experts like Richard Karstensen look for more subtle clues.
If this were in the Mendenhall Valley, we could easily tell how high the ice was just by looking at the tree growth patterns. But we're up so high here, we don't have those kind of obvious clues. So we look for more subtle things like percentages of the different species of heather. We could look for the size of lichens growing on the rocks, because they grow at a fairly slow, steady rate. And we could look for landforms too. This stuff here feels to me like it's been around a long time. The mix of plants and the size of the lichens on the rocks, it feels much more like a typical alpine tundra, so I don't think the glacier got this high.
In the alpine country, it's hard for plants to grow because of the lingering snows and the short growing season. People who venture above timberline may observe more than plants, because from up here, there are vistas that expand the view and the mind.
The attractions of alpine to most people are that combination of the expansiveness. You get up out of the forest that encloses us when we're down low, plus the really intricate little plants. It's that combination of the micro, down on your knees looking at the stuff, and then the sweeping views that really knocks people out.
Each stage of plant succession provides a new and changing habitat for wildlife. As a glacier recedes and the land begins its cycle of rebirth and regrowth, animals also begin to move in. The new growth and changing landscape produce a wide range of habitats for a variety of bird species, fish, and mammals of all sizes. Salmon pioneer newly emerging streams, becoming important food sources for bears, eagles, and small mammals. They all play an important role in the reclamation of the barren glacial landscape.
And yonder, glistening amid the irised spray, is a still more striking revelation of warm life in the so-called howling waste. Half a dozen whales, their broad backs like glaciated bosses of granite heaving aloft in near view, spouting lustily, drawing a long breath and plunging down home in colossal health and comfort.
While exploring the fjords and glaciers, John Muir couldn't help but see the abundant wildlife that exists in their shadows. Visitors today have the same opportunities.
One bird embroidered the silence with cheery notes, making the solitude familiar and sweet, while the solemn monotone of the stream sifting through the woods seemed like the very voice of God, humanized, terrestrialized, and entering one's heart as to a home prepared for it.
Some of the greatest concentrations of birds occur along the wetlands, created by deposition of glacial silt. In the Stikine River entrance, birds gather each spring to feed.
The Stikine Delta here, we're learning, is perhaps a real significant site for a number of different birds. First, we have the bald eagles that come in and concentrate, and what we believe is that they're concentrating for the hooligan run, or the smelt, that come in mid-April. And we've estimated a peak of about 1,600 eagles that come in here, and we believe this is about the second largest concentration of bald eagles in North America, next to the chilkat. Then about the time the eagles are kind of falling off in numbers and the smelt run's dying out, is the snow geese start coming in. And we have documented anywhere from 8,000 to 10,000 snow geese that concentrate on the flats out there. The principal shorebirds that we're studying out here are western sandpipers. We believe we've had peaks on the delta of around 300,000 shorebirds at any one time. For ecological importance, we're trying to study how long individual birds stay on the delta. Shorebirds, at each stop of their migration, they feed for a few days and accumulate fat and energy to allow them to fly to their next stop along that migration corridor. And the critical question is how important is each stop, and we believe each is essential because it allows them to get to the next stop. And if for whatever reason one of these sites was for some reason removed or disappeared or altered, it may affect the entire migration ecology of these birds, and that's why we'd like to understand the importance of the Stikine in relation to other sites along the flyway.
Just as the glacial silt creates important resting spots for birds, glacial ice is important for another animal. Seals give birth on ice floes near glacier faces, where they are more protected from predators like killer whales. Scientists take advantage of the concentration of seals on the ice floes to study them.
And how about adults and pups? What did you get a breakdown on those?
For adults hauled out, I got 2,932.
Okay.
What did you get?
2,827. So.
Beth Matthews and her University of Alaska students set up camp near Johns Hopkins Glacier in Glacier Bay National Park. They count the number of seals and the number of mother-pup pairs. The research helps determine the health of the harbor seal population in the park.
The harbor seal haul-out here in Johns Hopkins Inlet may actually now be the largest or one of the largest in the world, and that's not so much the numbers of seals hasn't increased here, but at some of the haul-outs, which used to be the largest, have declined so severely that this is now relatively a more important place, and that wasn't really known before this study was started.
Seals on ice floes are just some of the animals that thrive along the inside passage. With glaciers as a backdrop, that wildlife is an additional superlative to already stunning scenery.
After we passed between the two mountain rocks that guard the gate of the fjord, the view that was unfolded fixed every eye in wondering admiration. No words can convey anything like an adequate conception of its sublime grandeur.
John Muir visited the glaciers of the Inside Passage as a scientist and conveyed his reactions as a poet. Whether scientist or tourist, those visiting the glaciers today have their own way of putting the experiences into perspective.
I kind of get the chills when I come in here. And it's not because of all the ice. It's because it's so exciting. It's always changing, and being as close as we are to nature here, I think that's what makes it really special.
Every time you turn a corner here, you see something new. And that's why I like LeConte so much. It's just, you keep thinking you're seeing something beautiful and you turn the corner and there's something even more beautiful around the corner. And then that last corner, you're right in front of the glacier. So that's, I think that's what makes it spectacular.
These things that are very lifeless and cold tend to evoke very strong, warm emotions in people. You know, it's bigger than life, and it's as John Muir said, the best news that's available. You know, this is how the Earth is sculpted.
When the weather breaks and it's calm and it's beautiful, you sit up on these summits or on a high ridge, and there's a strange thing that happens to you. You begin to sense your own minuteness and the shortness of life, and yet at the same time, in a split second, you sense the eternity of the universe.